You are listening to the Stave Off Podcast, the podcast that gives you the information you need to stave off illness and injuries, letting you live a happy life. And now your hosts, Nick and Christina.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Stave Off Podcast. I am your host, Christina Novak, and each week, or in this case, each week-ish, we come on here and we start talking about different issues around health. As a physiotherapist, I feel like education is one of my main roles when it comes to how I interact with my clients and the people that are coming in to stave off, whether it be the physio side or the gym side. And this podcast is a direct result of a lot of those conversations. Today, I thought we would do probably a little bit of a shorter episode and talking about frailty. This is a big area for my doctoral studies. And when we think of frailty, I think it's very easy for us to have this picture in our mind of the frail older lady or that person who is hunched over and clearly not doing that well. And I guess the question is that true? So when I started my PhD work, frailty was one of the big kind of topics in the aging research sphere. And the definition of frailty and what it means to be frail is actually still really debated. There's kind of two lines of thinking when it comes to frailty in terms of what characterizes a person to be frail. But the idea is that when you're frail, it's not necessarily a sickness, but it's a condition where we are vulnerable. If you're asking someone in geriatrics or working with frailty, they would say that it's a vulnerability to stressors. What that means is you're less resilient. If you get a cold, you get knocked down for weeks instead of only having it last a couple of days. If you were to fall, you are probably a little bit more likely to break something or have a fracture as a result of something that for other people may not have been so have such a severe injury, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so when we're talking about frailty, there's two kind of lines of thinking that are the most prominent. And one is called the physical phenotype of frailty. And the other one is called the accumulation of deficits hypothesis. And basically, they sound like big fancy names, but what it means is the one is saying that there are certain physical markers that we can look at that would explain whether a person is frail or not. And those markers are things like low physical activity. So if a person is spending a ton of time sitting around and not doing as much as they should be, that could be one of the markers. Another one is slow walking speed. In the physio world, we call that gait speed, but essentially are you walking at a slow pace, sometimes with a shuffling type of walking pattern? Are you losing weight unexpectedly? So are you it's no reason, but all of a sudden you've lost more than 10 pounds in the last 6 months and you're not really sure why that's happening? That can be actually a cause for concern for your doctor. So if you feel like that might be you or someone that you're close to, maybe having a doctor check in. But if it's because you're trying to lose weight because you have that 10 or 15 pounds to lose, or you've noticed a big decrease in how much you're eating or something that can explain why the scale has gone down, that's something different. So low physical activity is one. Walking slowly is another. Losing weight unexpectedly is another. Feeling like you have very low energy or you have a hard time getting going So high levels of fatigue with just day-to-day life, not like you did a really big workout the night before and you feel really tired in the morning, or you ended up having to get up 4 or 5 times, so you're waking up not feeling rested. It's something that is more without cause. So you're starting to feel like your mood is very low. You don't really want to get out of bed in the morning. And when you do get out of bed, it feels like a struggle. That type of thing. And then the 5th sign is muscle weakness. And so this is, I guess, something that we talk about a lot at Stave Off, is that one of our biggest indicators of if we're going to stay in our home for long periods of time, notwithstanding any sudden illness, is, are you strong enough? Most of the time when we're going about our chores day to day, it's not that we're huffing and puffing. It's because our legs aren't strong enough to, get us out of a chair, or, get into and out of the shower, or stand up for long periods of time. It's often some of our muscles not being as strong as they need to be that contribute to that. Therefore, when we're talking about the physical phenotype or the physical manifestation of frailty, we're looking at these 5 things. And so if you have none of these things, then you're considered obviously non-frail. If you have 1 or 2 of these things, you may be in an at-risk zone. And if you have 3 or more, you may be considered frail and therefore more vulnerable to different illnesses, or if you were to get sick or something like that. Some people think that pre-frailty isn't a thing, but like kind of in summary, the 5 things that we're looking about when we're looking for when we're talking about frailty with some of our older clients are, again, low physical activity or low movement in general, not just you're not exercising. Fatigue, that you're walking slower, that your muscles aren't as strong as they need to be. And did I lose them? Oh, fatigue. I was like, I know what these 5 are. I should know. They're part of my schoolwork. So those are the 5. And so when we are talking about this from a research perspective, we have different criteria for each one. But just to kind of get an idea that if we're looking at a person who may be frail, it's the, slower walking, not a lot of energy, tends to be losing weight without meaning to, and just doesn't feel as strong as they need to be. The other line of thinking, which is the accumulation of deficits hypothesis, is that as we start to get more aches, pains, and ailments, our likelihood of being frail goes up. And so I don't know if you can think of somebody in your life who has, kind of a lot of stuff going on. They could have a backache. They could have arthritis in their knees. All of a sudden they're borderline diabetic. They've had a heart attack in the past. Their breathing is becoming more labored. All of those things that have just started to build on each other until they get to this threshold level where they feel like they can't do a lot of things, or they're on a lot of medications in order to be able to do the things that they want to do day to day. And so from that perspective, frailty is essentially that our body is trying to battle or improve a lot of different things that are going on in our life. And because of that, we are more vulnerable to other things, as Boomer is crying to try and get outside or have somebody pay attention to him. Okay, so those are the 2. And if you think that this might be a loved one, or if you feel like you're starting to get to a position where you do feel like you're very vulnerable to certain things, Boomer, stop. Sorry, listeners. Life in the clinic with a dog in it. The biggest thing that can really help with some of those factors is exercise. And that's a big component of my PhD studies, is looking at trying to identify people who feel like they're slowing down, whether it be because of injuries that have lasted a long time, arthritis, anything like that, and trying to get people to be more active and move around a lot more so that they don't get into that position where they're feeling like they are super vulnerable or that they have to be in hospital for whatever reason because of that vulnerability. And a physiotherapist is a person that can really help with that because in our training, we get a lot of information about different chronic conditions, not to mention the rehab side of it. And when we blend that information with knowledge around exercise, we can really help to, get that independence back, get you back to where you want to be and having more energy and being able to do more things. And it's a slower process because exercise, it didn't take you a week to go from being perfectly able to do everything to not being able to do it. And therefore, it'll be a process to go back the other way. But it's so worth it. And challenging yourself and getting into an exercise program can be one of the best things that you do, not only for your life now, but for your life decades from now. And I think it's something really important for all of us, no matter what age that we're in, to realize that exercise is one of those things that is going to keep us healthy and make sure that we don't get into trouble with, different aches and pains and chronic conditions. And I always say that if exercise was a pill, it would be called a miracle pill because right now it can help with signs and symptoms or prevent the development of 36 different chronic conditions. And if we think about that from the second frailty hypothesis, the accumulation of deficits hypothesis, that is huge. It's huge. And so it can really help with a lot of different things. If you want to hear a little bit more about some of my research, I do have a personal Facebook page where I talk a little bit more about some of the ins and outs of my PhD studies. I don't want to bore people for too long when we talk about it. And so I can put a link in the show notes to that where I put a little bit more of my technical physio stuff and rant and rave about the profession in a really good way. I'm not ranting and raving. That sounds so negative. And so I'll put a link there. And then I did a really brief frequently asked question about frailty a couple of months ago. Actually, it was probably in the fall. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. All right. Make sure if you think that you're kind of on that frailty spectrum, or if you feel like, I'm just not as able as I was before, it's time to, kick your butt into gear. And exercise is one of the best things that you can do for that. So make sure you seek out whomever is on your healthcare team to really help you with that, because I think it'll pay in dividends, not just now, but definitely decades from now. All right. I think that is it for our podcast episode for today. I said it was going to be a little bit shorter. I'm not going to be ranting and rambling for too long today. If you haven't yet, I would love if you could subscribe to the podcast or give it a 5-star review so that we can share all this information with a lot of our clients or our friends and family who are interested in health, but sometimes can get bogged down by the amount of information sometimes we can find on the internet. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free, email us at info@staveoff.ca, and we will see you guys next week. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Stave Off podcast. Go to staveoff.ca to check out the show notes and more helpful content and how you can lead a long and happy life. This podcast is brought to you in partnership with the Senior Rehab Project at seniorrehabproject.com.